spell of weather is expected to continue with snowfalls, heavy at times in most parts of the country. Winds will be northeasterly, strong to gale force, producing blizzard conditions in exposed areas, together with the risk of moderate to severe drifting. Temperatures will remain near freezing all day, with icy conditions on roads. And the outlook for tomorrow, little change.
It's farmers on Dartmoor who need help the most. They've taken the full force of the blizzard. This afternoon, an RSPCA team managed to reach the hamlet of Sheepstore, cut off since Saturday by 20-foot drifts, although it's only a few miles from Plymouth.
The situation in Dorset was so bad, the police took the unprecedented step of banning all vehicles from the roads except those on emergency duty. Near Oakhampton, 3 people...
A change in wind direction and a dropping tide saved Torcross from further devastation this morning. It had been feared that one more tide like yesterday's, accompanied by gale force southeasterly winds, would have wiped out the village completely. Although the waves were still breaking perilously close to seafront homes, no further damage was done, giving villagers a chance to clear up and dry out.
Few boats expected such a ferocious storm, and the fleet of over 300 that set out from Cowes in calm weather...
We're all affected by the weather. It can put people's lives at risk, and it can seriously affect their livelihood. From the earliest times, sailors, farmers and fishermen have looked for ways of how to forecast the weather.
When we used to see that the sky was very, very clear, could see a long way, we knew then that we were in for some rain. Rain. And we used to look up in the sun sometimes, and you might see a circle around the sun, and we knew that that was foretelling a change.
They look at the clouds sometimes and they say, oh, mare's tails and mackerel sky, 12 hours rain and 12 hours dry.
If we look up into the sky in the evening and see shales like a mackerel's back, then you can bet your life you're going to have fog or drizzle. And again, what we call horsetails, little things drifting through the sky with white flails on the end, then that is wind. And 98 times out of 100, you aren't far wrong on those.
Weather sayings are all very well.
Echo Bravo, clear roll, the surface wind 280 at 15 knots.
If you're flying an aircraft, you need to know much more about the weather. Providing that information are scientists who study the weather, meteorologists. Scientific forecasts depend upon observations taken at fixed times of the day. First, there's temperature. Weathermen measure the temperature inside a specially designed weather screen. In the screen, there's a second thermometer. It's got a piece of moist muslin wrapped around its bulb. It measures a different temperature needed by weathermen to calculate the amount of water vapour in the air, the humidity. Something else that needs to be measured is rainfall. The rain gauge is carefully sighted out in the open. All this rain has fallen here since it was last measured 6 hours ago. Next, there's the look of the sky. The clouds give important clues as to how the weather is changing. Then there's wind direction and wind speed. Here it's blowing from the west. And the speed? About 20 knots. Most important of all, though, there's air pressure. This instrument, a barometer, records changes in the air pressure, whether it's rising or falling. To get a measure of the air pressure, weathermen use a more sensitive barometer. Air pressure is measured in millibars. All the observations are recorded and entered in the daily log. But observations at ground level are not the only ones needed. Here, at another weather station, preparations are made at a similar time to obtain observations from above the Earth's surface. Hydrogen gas is used to fill a balloon which carries a package of instruments up into the upper atmosphere. The package contains a simple barometer to measure air pressure. Above is an instrument which measures the amount of water vapour in the air, the humidity. In this case, it's measured by a piece of material which changes its length as the humidity alters. On top is an instrument for measuring temperature. It works electrically. The sensitive part is a very fine coil of tungsten wire. The instruments are all connected through a rotating switch to a radio transmitter, which sends back readings from each instrument in turn at regular intervals of time. The package, with its own battery and transmitter on board, is made as light as possible. When it eventually returns to Earth, its fall will be broken by a parachute. The package is called a radio sonde and transmits its signals from an aerial made from a piece of copper wire.
That's going to be straight out of the way. Okay, then.
As it ascends, readings are transmitted continuously to the weather station below. Here they're processed by a mini-computer. The readings arrive in sequence: pressure, temperature and humidity. When sufficient readings have been obtained, the information is transferred onto punched tape. It's then sent by teleprinter to the headquarters of the meteorological office. Back at the other weather station, the ground level observations taken just before noon, one of the fixed times when observations are made, are put into a coded message. Like the radio sonde readings, the ground level readings also go by teleprinter to the headquarters of the Met Office. Here, every hour on the hour, readings pour in from stations all over the Northern Hemisphere. They're processed in a computer, one of the biggest in Europe. But it doesn't just receive readings from land stations. Also pouring in are observations from weather ships stationed out in the Atlantic. Here, the weathermen send their coded messages back by Morse. As the message is received, it's fed straight into the computer, along with all the other observations. The ships are stationed to give us as much advance warning as possible of the weather that's on its way. Using special symbols, the computer begins to plot the ground level observations for noon on this particular day. The computer plots them in their correct positions geographically, along with the outline of the coastlines as well. In a matter of minutes, the machine is able to plot over 150 observations from Northern Europe alone. To plot all this by hand would take very much longer. However, that's the way some observations still have to be plotted. These are the symbols representing the ground level observation we saw being taken earlier. The computer uses the same symbols. The computer-drawn map, once completed, is now transmitted to other meteorological offices throughout the country where forecasts are made. It's sent down a telephone line. One such office is at St Morgan in Cornwall. It's the place where we saw that ground level observation being made. And it only takes a short time from sending in the observations to receiving back the computer-drawn map. So far, we've only collected and plotted lots of observations. Now to interpret and predict what the weather's doing. The forecaster first looks for patterns. In particular, patterns in the ever-changing air pressure. He begins by drawing lines through places where he can see the air pressure is the same. The lines are called isobars. With practice, the forecaster is able to spot these quite quickly. He draws the isobars at equal intervals of pressure. On this chart, at intervals of 4 millibars. This line, 4 millibars lower, encircles an area of low pressure called a depression. He's already got a rough idea of the pattern from an earlier chart drawn 6 hours ago, but it doesn't just show the isobars. The thicker lines show boundaries between warmer and colder air masses. They're called fronts. This one is a warm front and it has a special symbol to show which way it's moving. The other line is a cold front. The symbol for this is different. It's fronts like these that bring us cloud and rain. The forecaster must now look to see how the pressure patterns and the fronts have developed. 30 hours ago, it looked like this. Watch what happened as the hours ticked by. Two areas of low pressure with their fronts seem to be moving eastwards towards the British Isles. What the forecaster must now decide is if these two depressions will continue to move towards the British Isles, and if so, how they will affect the weather.
The depression here has been moving eastwards out of the way. Of course, at one time it was over here. We're now waiting for similar depression to gradually move in and take its place.
But how quickly? To help make that decision, he receives a forecast chart from the Met Office headquarters. This shows the predicted positions of the weather patterns. It's produced by the senior forecaster there with the help of the computer's vast store of information, in particular the upper atmosphere readings. But there's one more valuable source of information to consider. Information from space. Above the Earth is a satellite sending back signals from which pictures of the cloud pattern can be produced.
It's here.
The pictures are also sent to the Met Office headquarters and retransmitted by telephone line to all the forecasting stations. The satellite picture will help confirm the position of the fronts that the forecaster's drawn up on his chart.
You want the satellite chart?
Have you finished printing it? Good.
He now has just about all the information modern technology can provide. As a scientist, he must now use his skill to predict from this what the weather's going to do next. And the people who'll be asking him are the air crews on the local RAF station.
Afternoon. Nimrod, duty officer this afternoon and flying in the Bay of Biscay tomorrow. Do you have any chance of diversion?
Well, we have the warm front making reasonable progress towards us, so I'm afraid the outlook for overnight tonight is rather poor, in that it'll be bringing in lots of very low cloud, and we think it will start affecting St Morgan from about 2200, and thereafter rapidly lower and go into fog. So the poor visibility is to accompany the very low cloud.
For this kind of operation, detailed forecasting of the weather is essential. The chance of fog is just one of many features which can seriously affect flying plans. But weather forecasting isn't only done for the benefit of air crews. Here at the BBC, there's a weatherman whose job it is to give everybody else an idea of what's going to happen to the weather. And this is where I come into the picture. Now, I've just got a chart for the same day from the Met Office headquarters. It shows the observations taken at 6 p.m, but only in the British Isles. The first thing I do is to draw on the isobars. These, you'll remember, are lines through places where the air pressures are the same. As you can see, it's quite a quick job when you know what to look for. On this chart, isobars are drawn at 2 millibar intervals. Now, from these plotted symbols, I can pick out where the showers are. Some up here over Scotland and Ireland. And there's some more down here in the southeast corner of England. It was this showery weather which gave all the rainfall you saw being measured at St Morgan earlier on today. Oh yes, there's a heavy shower up there in the north that I missed. But I can see something interesting here over southwest Ireland. The station there is reporting rain, and the reason it's interesting is because the weather for the next day will probably come from the west, and that's something I'm going to have to sort out for tomorrow's forecast. And it rather looks from the observations that that warm front, which was out over the Atlantic, is now getting pretty close. The warm front, you'll remember, marks the front edge of a mass of warmer air, which is being carried towards us by the wind. The direction of the wind is shown roughly by the isobars. This one is 1,012 millibars. Although there are only one or two observations to work from, it does seem quite likely that there's a band of cloudy weather with some rain along that front. Now, I'm also interested in the measurements from that radio sonde that went up under the balloon this morning. It's plotted on a special graph. Being down in the southwest, it gives me a better idea of what the front is doing up above. I've also got my copy of the satellite picture. There's at front the band of cloud just to the west of Britain. And there's another one coming up right behind it. Good evening. These westerly winds have brought temperatures a fair bit lower than we've seen in recent weeks. Some heavy showers too. Most of the showers on this trough here, which has moved away from the east. Some more fronts queuing up in the west though. The satellite picture shows that quite well. This one was taken earlier on today, and you can see most of the country having this speckled shower cloud. Some of those showers quite heavy. A lot of those are dying away now, but some quite thick cloud out to the west, which will come across southwestern parts tonight and into the northwest tomorrow, and the next set of fronts further out to the west across the Atlantic, ready to reach western areas later tomorrow. And for most of us, I think the character of the day is one of showers. Some sunshine between the showers, although the southwestern corner will start off rather cloudy with some more persistent rain running down there towards northern France. And although many of these central and eastern parts are going to start off dry and fairly bright, showers once more quite heavy will develop by the afternoon. And that's it. And this is what it was like down in the southwest the next day. As you see, it started off dull and overcast, and really quite misty, and I can't see any of that rain yet. What's more, as the morning progressed, it became steadily mistier. Not quite the kind of weather I predicted, and certainly not holiday weather. There wasn't any rain, and the wind was only just enough to fly a kite. To find the sun, one had to go further east, near London, where, after a wet start to the day, the Queen was opening Ascot in brilliant sunshine.
And indeed, there's been 1 inch and 3/4 of rain since last Friday.
The heavy showers were something I did forecast, and so were the sunny intervals, so it seems the forecast worked pretty well for Ascot, but it wasn't quite what I expected down in the southwest. And we can see what actually happened if we go back to yesterday's chart. A second low, or depression, further out to the west, moved up very quickly and became much more important than the one ahead that we were watching. This had the effect of changing the whole pattern of the chart. This pattern of the actual weather looks very different from the one forecast 24 hours earlier. We can see this more clearly on the satellite pictures for the 2 days. This is the one on the day of the forecast. The bank of cloud to the west are the fronts we were following. The next day, the cloud pattern had completely changed. There's a swirl of cloud around our newly formed depression. Its fronts lie right across the western part of the country, bringing us that dull, misty weather. So, what do you think will happen down there in the misty southwest next?
Well, usually this old sea mist, you know, the sea mist tend to hang around here, and then by about lunchtime it tends to break away a bit, you know, come away, as I say, 1, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I think it'll turn out quite a nice day. Hope you don't prove me wrong.
Our next programme is the midday